Top 10 NBA centers of all time. At number 10, we have Patrick Ewing. Patrick Ewing may have never led the league in points, rebounds, or blocks, but he was great in all those categories and always near the top of those leaderboards. And that seemed to be the theme of his career. Always good, but never the best. And that largely has to do with the era he played in. The 90s were the golden age of big men, and because of all the other all-time bigs surrounding him, Ewing received less All-NBA teams and other accolades than he likely should have had. He also had the misfortune of playing in the same conference as Michael Jordan, which made it essentially impossible for him to win a ring. Patrick Ewing is one of the greatest big men of all time, but his resume is a bit underwhelming, largely as a result of his era and the competition surrounding him. At number 9, we have Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard is a controversial name now and someone who may not have necessarily had the best longevity, but the reason he's in the top 10 is because of how good he was in his prime. At his peak, he was a top 5 player in the league and one of the most physically dominating forces we've seen since Shaq. For an 8-year stretch between 2006 to 2014, Dwight made 8 All-Star teams, 8 All-NBA teams, 5 All-Defensive teams, won 2 blocks titles, 5 rebounding titles, 3 straight Defensive Player of the Year awards, and led the Magic to the 2009 finals as their best player. He was unanimously the best big in the league for almost a decade, and that's something that can't be ignored. At number 8, we have Nikola Jokic. This entry may be controversial since Jokic has only played 7 full seasons at the making of this video, but he definitely earns this spot in my opinion. The Joker is the most skilled offensive big in the history of the game. He scores at an extremely efficient rate with his elite post game and ability to stretch out and shoot jumpers. But his scoring isn't even his biggest strength. He's not only the best playmaking big of all time, but one of the greatest playmakers ever regardless of position. His unique skill set makes him one of the greatest talents in league history, and the accolades are starting to reflect that as he's won back-to-back MVPs. At the rate he's going, I have no doubt he'll continue to rack up accolades and will finish a lot higher on this list. Now before we move on with the list, if you're enjoying the video so far, please make sure to give a like and subscribe for more great NBA content. Now continuing on with the rankings, at number 7 we have David Robinson. David Robinson has one of the most imposing physical physiques in league history, and he used that frame and strength to dominate players on both ends. Offensively, he was an elite high-volume scorer, averaging 26 points per game for the first 7 years of his career before he had a career-altering foot injury. Defensively, he was one of the greatest rim protectors ever, averaging 3 blocks per game for his career. Throughout his 14 years in the league, he accomplished it all. With 10 All-Star appearances, 10 All-NBA teams, 8 All-Defensive teams, a scoring title, rebounding title, block title, Defensive Player of the Year award, an MVP, and even 2 championships later in his career. Granted, he was no longer their best player. Robinson has one of the most decorated resumes ever, and the fact that he's only 7th on this list shows how stacked the center position is. At number 6, we have Moses Malone. Moses Malone is one of the most underrated players in NBA history. He's one of the greatest rebounders ever with 6 rebounding titles. He's more particularly the greatest offensive rebounder ever by far. To put into perspective how large the gap is, for his career he has 7,382 offensive boards. Artis Gilmore, who's next on that list, has 4,816. That's over 30% less than what Malone had. Moses had a lot of great accomplishments throughout his career, including winning 3 MVPs, but his greatest accomplishment came in 1983 when he joined the Sixers and led one of the greatest teams of all time to a championship, winning the Finals MVP and nearly sweeping everyone along the way. At number 5, we have Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain was a myth. He was over 7 feet tall with a 50-inch vertical, could bench press over 500 pounds, and routinely beat Olympic sprinters in races. I don't think it was a stretch at all to say he was the greatest pure athlete ever, and all this athleticism translated directly onto the court, as he may be the most dominant force the league has ever seen, and put up statistics that are mind-boggling, such as his 1962 season where he averaged a ridiculous 50 points and 26 rebounds per game. From his 100-point game to his 48.5 minutes average and his all-time rebounds total. Is literally hundreds of unbreakable records, which is why many people actually consider him the GOAT, and why placing him at 5 on this list will be controversial to a lot of people. But the reason I can't put him any higher is simply because of his playoff shortcomings and propensity to stat chase. Regardless though, it can't be denied that he's a legend and one of the greatest players in the history of the sport. At number 4 we have Bill Russell. Bill Russell is the greatest winner of all time. His 11 championships are more than not only anyone in the NBA, but all professional sports. We play the game to win, and no one was better at winning than Bill. But winning wasn't the only thing that Russell was the best at. He's also nearly unanimously considered the greatest defender of all time. His timing and instincts on that end are unmatched. Steals and blocks weren't recorded when he played, unfortunately, but spectators that watched him noted that he would get at least 5 to 6 blocks per game, with even 20 plus block games not being too out of the ordinary for him. Wilt was also by far the most influential defender ever. He pioneered so many concepts that we take for granted today, like simply jumping to contest shots, which wasn't common before he played. He may not have been great offensively, and it is fair to question the era he played in since there were less than 10 teams, which are reasons why I don't have many higher. But his historical resume and influence can't be ignored, and he easily earns a spot near the top. At number 3, we have Shaquille O'Neal, the most dominant force in the modern era. Standing at 7'1" and weighing over 300 pounds, Shaq was always the biggest and strongest guy on the court. But he paired that size with a level of quickness and mobility and explosiveness that shouldn't be humanly possible at his stature. Along with his physical gifts, he had a soft touch and toolbox of skills in the post that just made him unfair. He was as close to unstoppable as you can get. If he got it in the paint, he was getting a guaranteed bucket, and there's nothing that the defense could do about it. The reason why I have Shaq so high on this list and above other all-time greats is because of how elite he was at his peak and how he elevated his game in the postseason when it mattered the most. There may be no individual player ever who was as good as Shaq was in the early 2000s. He was the heart of the Lakers dynasty that won 3 championships in a row. And throughout all 3 finals of the three-peat, Shaq put up a ridiculous 36 points, 15 rebounds, and 4 assists, along with 3 blocks per game. Utter domination. At number 2, we have Hakeem Olajuwon. Of the legendary group of big men in the 90s, one player clearly stood out from the rest as the best, and that player was Hakeem. The best international player ever, Hakeem was elite on both ends. Offensively, he was the best and most skilled post scorer ever, having masterful footwork and possessing every move possible, including his iconic dream shake. But as great as he was offensively, it doesn't hold a candle to his defensive ability, where he has a legitimate argument to be the greatest on that end. And the accolades back up that opinion, as he's the all-time leader in blocks, made 9 all-defensive teams, won 2 rebounding titles, 3 blocks titles, and 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards. When Jordan went into his first retirement, Hakeem was the clear best player in the league, winning the MVP and Defensive Player of the Year award in 1994, along with back-to-back titles in 94 and 95, where he completely outplayed all the other elite centers in the league, some of which are on this list, such as Ewing, Robinson, and even Shaq. And at number 1, we have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar dominated the league for over 20 years with his iconic and unstoppable skyhook. He's won everything at the highest level and is the most decorated player in league history. I'm just going to read out some of his accolades. 19 All-Star teams, 15 All-NBA teams, 11 All-Defensive teams, 1 rebounding title, 4 blocks titles, 2 scoring titles, 3rd in blocks all time, 3rd in rebounds all time, the all-time leading scorer, 6 MVPs, 6 championships, and 2 finals MVPs. I don't think there's many more arguments I have to make to justify Kareem's position at 1. Subscribe for more great videos and comment down below if you agree with the rankings.